There is a certain kind of energy that never really truly dies, it just waits, sits in the background, and old arcade machines and late night co-op sessions with friends and brothers. And Streets of Rage is that kind of energy. It is pretty raw, immediate, timeless in a way that doesn't rely on nostalgia alone, but on just how it made you feel in the moment. And now with rumors swirling about a full Streets of Rage 1 remake, well, that energy feels like it's starting to move once again. Because this isn't just about bringing back a classic. It's about rebuilding the foundation of one of the most iconic beat-em-up series that is ever made. The original Streets of Rage was simple on surface. You walk around, fight, clear the screen, move on, but underneath that simplicity was rhythm, flow, a kind of pacing that turned every encounter into something almost musical. Hits landed with weight, enemies came in waves that forced you to adapt, and the soundtrack carried almost everything, pushing you forward with the pulse that felt alive. A remake has to understand that, not just recreate it, but translate it. Imagine those Streets of Rage again, but this time rebuilt with modern details, neon reflecting off with pavements, city lights stretching into distance, background characters reacting to fights instead of just existing as static pieces of scenery. The kind of world that feels active even when you're not directly interacting with it. We think that's the opportunity here. Not to take the core idea of Streets of Rage and place it inside an environment that feels immersive without losing that arcade intensity. Because that intensity is a lot of things, if not everything. If the rumors are pointing in the right direction, this remake wouldn't just be a visual upgrade. We think it'll be a full overhaul, new systems layered on top of the classic formula, combat that still feels immersive, but with more depth, more variation, more reason to experiment instead of repeating the same moves done over and over. Think about what modern beat-em-ups have done in recent years. Streets of Rage 4, for example, had already proved that the formula still works pretty well at that, but it also showed how much room there is to expand. Combos that just flow into each other, juggles that reward timing, defensive options that matter just as much as offense. And a remake of the first game could take all of that and build it into something that feels both familiar and also completely new as well. And then there's also, of course, the characters. Axel, Blaze, Adam. These aren't just sprites anymore, but icons right now. A remake is a chance to give them more presence with overcomplicating who they really are. Not through heavy dialogues or forced storytelling, of course, but through small moments, the way they move, the way they react between fights, the way the world acknowledges them, because part of the charm of the original game was just how little it said and how much it let the player fill in. That balance is pretty important. You don't want to turn Streets of Rage into something overly cinematic, but you also don't want it to feel empty. There is of course a middle ground where the story exists in the background, giving context without taking over. And that's where this remake could stand out. Now let's talk about structure. The original game was linear, and that's just part of its identity. Moving from one stage to the next, each one escalating in challenges and intensity, a remake could keep that structure while expanding what each level offers. Branching paths, hidden areas, optional encounters, small choices that don't break the flow but add replay value instead. Because replayability is a key for a game like this. It's not just about finishing it once, it's about mastering it, learning every pattern, optimizing your routes, pushing your score higher, maybe even doing it all again with a friend once it's over. Co-op has always been at the heart of Streets of Rage. Sitting next to someone, coordinating attacks, accidentally hitting each other, laughing, recovering, pushing through. That experience needs to be front and center. Whether it's local or online, the remake has to capture that feeling of shared chaos. Because that's what people remember. Not just the game, but who they played it with. In fact, technically the possibilities are wide open. Smooth animations that give every hit more impact, sound design that makes punches feel heavy, not hollow. Music that respects the original soundtrack while evolving it. Because let's be honest, the music in Streets of Rage isn't just good, it is legendary. Any remake that doesn't treat it as a core element is missing the point. And if done right, that could be one of the strongest parts of the experience. A soundtrack that adapts to the action, just like Streets of Rage 4, building tension, releasing it, carrying the player from one fight to the next without ever feeling repetitive. There's also one more important thing: the tone. Streets of Rage has always walked a line between gritty and stylized. It's a crime story, of course, but it's also exaggerated, larger than life in a way that makes it fun without losing its edge. A remake has to preserve that identity. It can't go too realistic, or it loses its charm. But it also can't stay too simple, or it risks feeling outdated. That balance is what defines whether this works or not. Now, one of the more interesting aspects of the rumors is the idea that this remake could be acting as a reset for the series. Not replacing what came before it, but reintroducing it in a way that makes sense for modern players. A starting point that feels accessible without being watered down. Because not everyone has played the original, but they've heard of it. They know the name, and this is the chance to show them why it mattered, why it still matters. In fact, there's also the potential for expanded systems beyond just combat. Light progression elements, unlockables, maybe even character customizations that doesn't break the core gameplay, but add a layer of personalization. These are the kind of additions that can extend the life of the game without changing its identity. However, again, restraint is important. Too much and it stops feeling like Streets of Rage. Too little and it risks feeling like a missed opportunity. We think the key is to just knowing where to draw the line. And if the developers understand that if they respect the original while still pushing it forward, then this remake could be something very special. Not per se just a return, but a reintroduction. A way to bring that raw arcade energy into space where it feels just as relevant as it did decades ago. Because at its core, Streets of Rage isn't complicated, it's about the movements, the impact, the rhythm, and the feeling of stepping into a fight where you know you're outnumbered but you push forward anyway. That feeling doesn't age, it doesn't fade, it just waits. And if this remake really happens, if it captures that energy and builds on it in the right way, then these streets won't just come back to life. They're gonna be hitting harder than ever.